Chapter 31.
Matron.
Is it over? What happened? Rinoa. What happened to Rinoa? The gentle breeze coming in through the open window was stirring her hair. Birdsong was floating in through the curtains from the courtyard, along with the soft chatter of the few people who chose to study in that area. From the infirmary though, the only sound that could be heard was the gentle scratch of Drive Katawaki's pen on a slip of paper. There were no other visitors besides Squall, because the doctor had banned anyone from entering unless it was a real medical emergency. She had done it for his sake, Squall knew. He hadn't needed to ask, she had just taken the liberty herself and laid down the ban. Giving him privacy. Giving him peace. Because Rinoa still wasn't moving. There wasn't anything wrong with her. She had no injuries. Her vital signs were all normal. She breathed on her own, technically. But it was so slow as to nearly be undetectable. Her temperature was dropping, like she was going into stasis. She was absolutely fine, but she was in a coma. Which, to Squall's thinking, wasn't absolutely fine at all. Yesterday afternoon. All night. Now this morning. She wasn't moving. She wasn't reacting. It was almost like Squall had kept up his vigil through the night. He hadn't even showered yet. He had brought her here and hadn't left once. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. He felt as numb as she acted. Because she still wasn't moving. Why wasn't she moving? The intercom dinged gently overhead, catching his attention. He didn't look away from Rinoa's still face, but he heard Quistis nonetheless call out over the speaker.
Squall, can you hear me? I have orders from Headmaster Sid. We're heading for Edia's house. We have the coordinates and Nita is going to be moving us soon. Sorceress Edia. Matron is back at the orphanage.
The intercom dinged off. Had she told him this way to keep from being forced to come down? He probably would have reacted similarly even if she had told him in person. He didn't move. His eyes stayed on Rinoa. Even as he heard Drive Katawaki's soft footsteps coming up from behind him, he remained still. His face closed off.
Hey, boy,
she looked at him gently, her hands on her hips.
Look at you. You're a right mess. All bloody and dirty.
Squall didn't stop her as she reached out and adjusted his jacket. Her hands were warm and Shiva wasn't in his head at the moment. Yet he had never felt so cold.
Here now, standing around won't accomplish anything.
The doctor walked to the side of Rinoa's bed, reaching out to gently check the pulse in her hand again. Her heart was beating slowly, but it was still beating.
What happened to her, doctor?
Was that hollow voice his?
I don't know yet. But we'll figure it out. Hey, now, don't look like that. I'll fix her. That's what I do, right? Commander, if you're going before the headmaster, you can't go like that.
What did it matter?
Here. Come on.
Drive Katawaki put her hand on his shoulder and pushed gently.
You go shower and shave. Change clothes, for Hein's sake. But...
Squall looked over her head to Rinoa. She hadn't moved. He still expected her to. He wanted to be there when she did. Because she was going to. She wasn't going to leave him like this.
Commander Leonhardt.
The doctor's tone had his back straightening automatically.
You have to debrief the headmaster. You have responsibilities. And one of those is to personal hygiene.
She sighed when he remained in one place.
Listen, if she wakes up, if she so much as twitches, I'll have Nito light the beacon on top of the garden, all right? Now, go. You can even sleep here with her tonight, and that's not an offer I give to everyone.
Squall's jaw tightened, his eyes still didn't leave Rinoa, but he allowed Drive Katowaki to push him from the patient room. Because she was right. He had a lot to do. Standing here, staring, was getting absolutely nothing done. Still, the quick shower he took did not give him the relief it normally did. He felt hollow. Like he was just going through the motions of everyday life. By the time he had dressed in fresh clothes and was leaving to go down to the front gate, Nito was already announcing that they were stopping. He also ordered that no one was to leave garden without permission direct from Squall himself. Galbadia garden was far gone. Or, at least, it wasn't going to be a problem now. The ring below it shattered, it could no longer move. The ranks of soldiers destroyed and scattered, their sorceress being carried between Zell and Irvine, only Cypher was left behind. Squall had only cared about getting Rinoa to the infirmary. By the time he remembered Edia, matron, she had already disappeared. Zell and Irvine had taken their eyes from her for 1 second. But she owed them answers, and Quistis and Selfie had volunteered to go find her. She hadn't been hiding, but she hadn't thought it right to stay at Balam Garden. The mercenary school she had helped found for the specific purpose of killing her didn't seem all that welcoming. The old stone orphanage had been abandoned for 10 years on a cape in Centra. Monsters had already looted it of anything edible. The stones were left to crumble, the house to fall into disrepair. When Squall and the others stepped onto the broken cobblestone path, it didn't even look like the same place from their memories.
It's totally destroyed,
Selfie said sadly, frowning around.
Well, it has been 10 years,
Quistis said, but her voice was just as full of sorrow. Their childhood home, their place of safety and security, was little more than ruins now. Squall stopped as they approached the front door. His eyes traveled off to the left, staring out into a wide field of pink and white flowers. It had been smaller then. The flowers had completely taken over the landscape now. Squall! Zell's call turned him back to the others. He was holding open the door and they were all looking his way, waiting for him. His feet felt heavy, but he stepped after them. He was the last into the door, but the others all paused and made way for him to walk to front. The sound of their footsteps in the old house alerted the occupants that they were there. Stepping in through a large hole in the wall, Headmaster Sid looked sheepish and guilty as he walked into view. He averted his eyes from them for a moment. Then, gathering his courage in a breath, he turned back and tried to smile. It looked like he had a toothache.
Many thanks for your hard work.
He laughed. It was pained and hollow. The others couldn't laugh along with him and his voice faded. His eyes downcast and his shoulders sagged.
Are you angry with me?
He laughed sadly now.
I don't blame you. All I can do is talk big, but in true times of trouble, I run away. I was in a no-win situation. Your defeat would mean the loss of my children. Your victory would mean the loss of my wife. I just couldn't bear to face either outcome. I couldn't.
Sid's voice trailed off. He took in another breath, slower this time.
How did you do it, Squall? How did you save her life?
Squall's voice was soft, distant.
A phoenix pinion. A gift from the Shumi. I couldn't. We couldn't bear to see her die either. It was all I could think to do.
If he hadn't done it, would it have saved Rinoa? Even Drive Katawaki's magic wasn't saving Rinoa. Maybe a piece of the phoenix could have.
A phoenix pinion.
Sid breathed.
Yes. That would do it. Thank you, my boy. Thank you. Please, I don't care about myself. Judge me as you will. But please forgive Edia.
Wincing in pain, Sid turned and walked back through the hole in the wall. The seeds followed after him slowly. It was somehow a punch in the gut to see her. Edia hadn't had a chance or opportunity to change out of her black gown. She had taken off her headpiece and her long black hair flowed freely down her back, but the claws on her gloves were attached to the dress. She looked a strange combination of sorceress Edia and matron. There was a faraway look in her eyes as she stared off into the gently rolling waves. A look that remained in place even as she turned to face them all. The 5 seeds she had nurtured and raised stopped in front of her. They stood in a line, unsure of what to do. Salute? Cry? Run away? Was there even an answer? Sid stood beside her, staring at her. The heartbreak in his eyes was mirrored in hers. 2 people that had given everything and were left hollow and empty because of it. Then Edia smiled. A broken, sad sort of smile.
My children. Please, forgive me.
It was her voice again. That sweet, loving voice that had sung them to sleep at night and greeted them every morning. Hearing that voice, more than seeing her face ever had, brought back such strong memories. Fragments and echoes. She took in a shuddered breath.
I raised you as my own. Yet still,
Edia trailed off, her mouth moving but words refusing to come. How could she beg forgiveness for what she had done? For the pain she had caused to her own babies?
We know,
Squall said softly.
We feel the same way.
Quistis smiled at her, trying her best not to make it obvious that she was still favoring one leg.
We fought, knowing the truth,
Irvine promised, just as sadly.
If anything,
Zell frowned at the ground.
We should be apologizing for attacking you. You're our matron.
Selfie sniffed back tears.
And yet we... No,
Edia hastened to say, then fell silent because she wasn't sure what to tell them. She shook her head, her smile becoming more genuine.
Your seeds. You cannot back out of a battle, I know. You were magnificent. Everything I had ever dreamed of you being and still greater than I had imagined. I didn't think it would be possible to stand and face you again.
Edia had to force back tears.
I'm so proud of you, children. However, it's not over yet. At any time, I may.
They all frowned, looking at her. Edia shook her head and lifted her eyes again.
I have been possessed. All this time. It was not me you've been fighting. I would never.
Edia paused and tried again.
I have been at the mercy of sorceress Ultimecia. Ultimecia.
Squall frowned. The name tasted strange on his tongue.
I didn't know that there were any other sorceresses left.
Quistis frowned. Edia shook her head.
There's not. At least, not here. Ultimecia is a sorceress from the future. A sorceress many generations ahead of our time. What?
Zell drew back.
Are you serious?
Edia nodded solemnly.
I'm afraid so. Ultimecia's objective in our time, the only reason she came back at all, was to find Elone. She is after Elone's strange power. Yes, I know about her power. I helped raise her. I know her very well. Ultimecia is a very fearful sorceress. Her heart is filled with anger and hate and bitterness. There was no way I was going to let her get a hold of Elone. The only thing I could do was surrender my body to Ultimecia and let her have control of that. Doing so allowed me to protect my mind. To keep the information I had about Elone safe. It was the only way I could save her. I was successful. To a point. The result of my actions. Well, you all know. The sorceress that appeared in Galbadia was Ultimecia. Inside my shell, she used my power to conquer that nation and take control of its resources so that she may find Elone herself. The good news is that Ultimecia has yet to achieve her goal. But, that is also bad news. I don't know why, but she's not inside me any longer. However, I believe she may attempt to use my body again to carry out her plans. I don't know where Elone is any longer, so if she tries again, this time I plan to make a stand. To fight her for my own body. But if that does not work, I may have to face you all in battle once again. I ask for your support, my seeds.
She looked at them, smiling sadly. The threat she had given them in her soft voice hung heavy in the air. She could become that monster again at any time.
If she's not in you any longer,
Irvine frowned,
then where is she? I would assume she's back in her own time. Did she give up then?
Selphie almost sounded hopeful. Edia shook her head.
No. She's obsessed. I believe. I think she might be trying to seek out a more powerful host than myself. Who?
Squall frowned.
Another sorceress.
Quistis frowned. Edia nodded and hesitated only a moment before divulging her theory.
Have you all heard of Sorceress Adele before? She was the tyrant of Esthar during the Sorceress War. Yeah, but she was deposed years ago,
Zell shrugged.
She's dead, isn't she? I think. Not. What?
Selphie and Irvine shared a look.
No one knows her whereabouts, but I'm certain she's not dead. If she was, we would have heard of someone inheriting her powers by now. Didn't you inherit her power?
Quistis asked cautiously.
The Galbadians must have thought I did. I don't blame them for that. Before this, I never made the habit of broadcasting my power, so no one ever knew I had it. I didn't want the attention. However, I did not inherit Adele's powers. I received my powers from a sorceress when I was only 5 years before Adele even took power in Esthar. I don't quite understand.
Irvine frowned.
I believe Sorceress Adele, wherever she is still alive. And that Ultimecia released my injured body in order to possess the body of Sorceress Adele instead. Sorceress Adele is... Well, they did not call her the tyrant because they held her in such favor. She is not the type to hesitate to use her powers for her own selfish desires. She brought about the entire Sorceress War because of her own greed for conquest. Should Sorceress Ultimecia from the future bequeath her anger and hatred unto Adele, their combined power would be unimaginable. Whoa!
Zell shifted uncomfortably.
The tyrant is still alive? I can't even. That's terrible.
Selphie shook her head.
Squall? Where are you going?
The others all turned at Quistis's question. Squall was already standing in the entrance of the hole in the wall. He looked back over his shoulder at them. His eyes were gone.
Let's hear what else Matron has to say,
Quistis said, indicating to her. Matron was staring at him, her long hair fluttering gently in the wind. The sad look in her eyes was calling to him, but just at that moment, he didn't care. Squall had heard enough. He knew. Of course, he knew that listening to what Matron had to say was important. But Rinoa. Frowning, Squall faced her fully.
Matron, do you know what's wrong with Rinoa?
The others blinked before looking away from him. He didn't care if they were uncomfortable with the subject. He would ask anyone who might have any answer.
Rinoa.
Edia frowned, sifting through the foggy memories she had from her time being possessed. It wasn't clear to her, and there were parts she would dearly like to forget. However, when she thought back to that last fight, there had been more than just her 5 children. There had been another. A girl whose face had been drawn in sorrow at seeing Edia destroy her weapon.
Rinoa is the girl in light blue,
she guessed.
I only remember vaguely. What happened to her? She was with us when we fought you. After the battle.
Squall hesitated, only because he didn't know how to describe it.
Her body was cold. She didn't move.
Sid gasped, his head coming up quickly in horror.
Did Rinoa die? No.
Squall's roar of denial echoed out over them, causing the others to flinch. Sid let out a long breath of relief, but Squall felt only pinpricks of unease. She hadn't died. She hadn't. Edia blinked at him before looking down. She couldn't bear to see her son like that. Just as heartbroken as she felt inside.
Forgive me, Squall. I don't think I can be of any help. I don't remember anything after you. I just don't remember.
Of course. It was a long shot.
It's all right,
he said, the words grinding out through his teeth. Because it wasn't all right. It wasn't. She was laying up in the infirmary and he was all the way out here. Sid and Edia shared a look. An entire conversation being held in a look. Because neither of them had seen Squall like this in all the years they had known him. Well, Edia had seen something like it. Once. Many years ago now. Sid let out another breath before turning to him.
Squall, I understand how you feel. I do. But you are in a position of leadership. The other students at Garden have a right to know about the outcome of the battle and what's to come. It's your duty to take whatever information you can get here back to Garden. Remember, it wasn't just Rinoa. Everyone fought. I know that.
But
Tisk, tisk.
Sid shook his head at him.
But. That isn't something a leader's shoulders say. You have responsibilities, Squall. You must fulfill your duties first.
Squall's fists were clenched tight, shaking. He knew that. But With a wordless cry of pain, Squall turned and slammed his fist into the wall. The stone broke under the force of the blow. The skin of his knuckles ripped in his glove, but he welcomed the pain. He didn't even allow Shiva to try to cure it. Rinoa.
So, Ultimatia's objective is to find Elone.
The first time we met was the day I became a seed. You were my first mission. A mission I still haven't finished. That's where we met again. In Timber.
Not because she wants Elone. She wants her power. The ability to send one's consciousness back into the past. So, Ultimatia wants to use her power.
We argued a lot at first. But then, things began to change. I couldn't keep pushing you away.
Oh, I get it. So like, Ultimatia wants to send her consciousness from this period further into the past. What's she going to do in the past?
You looked at me. You smiled when our eyes met. You laughed at my jokes. You were always by my side, even when I tried to prevent you from standing there.
Time compression. Time compression? The hell is that?
It made me feel calm. Tranquil. Like, for the first time in a long time, I had something more important to me than the next battle. You were waiting for me. I was finally ready.
It's time magic. Very advanced time magic that only a sorceress could use. The past, present, and future all get compressed together. But why? And what would happen to the world? Why do something like that? I can't even imagine a world where time is compressed.
Rinoa, please. Give me another chance.
Yo, Squall.
His eyes opened slowly. His fist was still in the wall, the blood drying in his gloves. The others were looking at him.
You're not even listening.
Selfie pouted at him.
So, basically, all we to do is prevent Ultimatia from getting a hold of Elone.
His eyes were cold and distant, his words dull and flat. But he had been listening.
Well, yes, but...
Quistis frowned. It wasn't right for Squall to be standing back against the wall when they were being told something so vital.
Then we're going back to garden,
he told them firmly.
We have to let everyone know. Hey,
Irvine frowned at his attitude.
We're worried about Rinoa too, you know. Then why don't you?
Squall cut himself off, lowering the fist he had raised. Because he had seriously thought about punching Irvine in the face. He turned from them.
Forget it. Stay if you want. I'm leaving. I have duties to fulfill.
Sid flinched. Having his words thrown back at him hurt. Even more so because that wasn't at all how he had intended them.
That about covers the update,
Squall was saying into the mic. It was the easiest, most efficient way to debrief the garden as a whole.
Our task at hand then is to find Elone. Then we'll deal with Ultimatia. Training and classes are to resume as normal while we search. Based on our last available information, Elone will be aboard the White Seed ship. We're setting out to look for it, though I can't be sure as to where it is. For the time being, we're going to gather information. Be prepared for battle at any time.
He hesitated just a moment.
And Sorceress Edia is back at her home. She's probably not our enemy any longer. Let's just leave her alone.
Squall released his thumb from the button on the mic. He heard the dinging of the system down below and Nita took the mic from him.
Rough stuff,
he frowned, releasing it back to the ceiling.
I've never even heard of white seed before. They're Edia's personal seeds,
Squall said, turning to step onto the platform.
Nita, you may retire. You're probably exhausted. Thank you, Commander,
Nita said gratefully. Squall was already traveling down the platform. His boots echoed gently as he stepped from the office and started towards the elevator. He had to wait for it to come up, but he had it to himself as he traveled down. The garden was moving on. The battle had been a big one, there had been many casualties, both dead and injured. However, they were seeds and seed cadets. This was their life. They were already getting back into their old, familiar rhythms. Some of them waved as he moved through the nexus. He almost didn't see them. They were used to his taciturn personality though. None were bothered as they moved about their business. If any of them were surprised as to his destination, no one mentioned it. Squall stepped into the infirmary and the silence of the room settled over him. Never before had he been so uncomfortable in the lack of sound. Drive Katawaki was out on errands at the moment, so he was alone as he moved into Rinoa's room. She hadn't moved from her position. He couldn't help but feel let down because he had really hoped, even in the impossibility of it. Squall moved to the side of her bed. Gently, he got down onto his knees, looking at her. In sleep, she had still looked alive. Right now. Squall reached out and swept some of her hair from her face. Her colorless cheeks were cold under his gloved hand. He was forcing Shiva to not wrap him in cold air right now for her sake, so he knew it wasn't his fault. She was just cold. Are you going to be like this forever?
Isn't there anything I can do?
Squall asked, his voice hoarse with desperation. An enemy, he could fight. A monster, he could slay. Any problem he could face head-on. But this nothingness was not something he could fight against. He had never felt so helpless in his life. There was nothing he could do and he knew it.
You were so full of life,
he mourned, running his hand down her shoulder. His ring glinted next to her mother's on the bed where they had fallen.
Now you don't even make a sound. I want to hear your voice. Please.
Squall felt like he was talking to a wall. Hollow and empty and lonely. So very lonely. Painfully ripping at his heart. He couldn't even seek her out for comfort because she was right there. And not there.
Rinoa. Call my name.
Squall took her hand in his. His face leaned over hers. She didn't react. She didn't move. Like he wasn't even there. A ghost that couldn't touch her. The loud, ear-piercing high-pitched tone was familiar now. Squall's teeth gritted as he fought his own consciousness was stolen from him. His head fell down, landing against Rinoa's arm. He felt himself falling into the darkness. Into Laguna's past. End of chapter.